All right, welcome to another Athletics Director U session. This one will be on data and technology. We're here at the Women Leaders Convention. I'm Amy Huchthausen, Commissioner of the America East Conference. I'm here with Kevin Blue, the Athletics Director at UC Davis, who's entering his fourth year, and Jill Bodensteiner, the AD at St. Joseph's University, who's beginning her second year. As I mentioned, our topic today is data and technology. Certainly no shortage of topics or information and conversation around this very broad topic. So I'll open it up, Kevin, and ask you. We read a lot in just general media, sports media about data and its prevalence in business operations and performance. I think today we'll talk mostly about the business ops side. But is there a data revolution in the college sports industry?
Revolution is an interesting term. I think that from what I read and from what we've participated in my career, I think that there's very much an increased awareness of the importance of data and analytics on the business side, for sure. I think there's also has developed a strong narrative about its importance. And I think that increasingly it's important for organizations to distill what is real and what's going to add business value from what is narrative and what is maybe trendy to talk about, and really understanding that and really being able to dig into what type of business processes are going to actually make a difference. I think that's important.
Yeah. Jill, from a campus perspective, entering your second year, probably just starting to feel comfortable, hopefully, with the systems at St. Joe's. But what are how are you using data or improving your systems around data collection to drive decision making?
Yeah, great question. And I think Kevin frames it nicely. I mean, we're bombarded with vendors saying you need this if you're going to be on the cutting edge. And if you hope to, compete in the A10, you need this form of data. So I think about it, I group it in my mind. And I think first and foremost, what we're all sort of referring to, let's call it revenue generation related data. And there, I think you've got to do just a real serious look at your own campus. And Kevin and we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but thinking of ROI, right? I have a 4,200 person basketball arena, and we sell it out on a pretty regular basis. We ticket 2 sports. I'm in a very different need for revenue generation data than some of our colleagues facing softening attendance, 100,000 seat stadiums. So there's the revenue generation. Number 2, just your good old fashioned decision making, your benchmarking data. And luckily we've got IPP, we've got conference financial dashboards. We've got, some people subscribe to, including myself, WinAD. So there's a lot of information out there. Third, I would say student athlete centric, right? Whether it's sports specific, performance, sports science, those sort of things. And then fourth, how we communicate is data and technology. And so that's sort of where I see the big picture. For me, the most immediate need and best use of our money when it comes to data relates to our student athlete performance. That's, again, knowing my university, knowing what market we're in. If I'm going to find a competitive advantage, it's probably going to be less on data capture of our marketing of our 4,200 seat arena and more on reducing medical claims and injuries and those sort of things. So that's kind of how I know your campus, know what might be most helpful, because we don't have all the resources in the world to subscribe to all those. So that's my take on it.
I think that's a great point. When you study the things that people are doing at the professional level and really at the high end of the Power 5, where the revenues are substantial, the investment that's required to make a big difference on the business side in data and analytics, whether it's people, processes, systems, that's going to be relatively fixed and consistent no matter what your revenue is, right? Let's say it's a $500,000 investment or what have you. So for athletic departments like ours and yours, we have to understand is even if you're able to generate a 20 or 30% return, is that return worth the initial upfront investment? Whereas, a revenue picture, as you might find in the top end of the Power 5 of a couple $100 million, a $500,000 investment can be covered by some very marginal improvements in performance on the business side. So I think that's important, right? It's a fixed level of investment, but the returns really depend on the magnitude of the revenue in the first place. And so that's something that obviously we consider, and I think you guys consider that as well.
Kevin, you've been at Stanford before, certainly different resources between Stanford and UC Davis, but UC Davis is a powerhouse on the academic side. How have you been able to leverage some of the academic research that you've been interested in, but also that exists on campus at Davis to help establish this culture of using data information, whatever
Yeah.
that means, to the most sophisticated to the most basic, to still drive improved decision making?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the most important thing that I've learned in my career so far around this topic of data and analytics is the cultural aspect of it. Do you have people in your organization that want to understand the facts and the realities before making a decision, and then make your decision based on those facts and realities? And that cuts across a number of things, the business side being one of them. But Jill mentioned a number of other aspects of college athletics that affects as well. So what we try to do is think about what's true, what's real, what do the numbers say, what are the facts, what does our intuition say as well. But we do really want to be informed by what the realities are, no matter how difficult those realities might be, in order to make decisions.
Yeah. I've noticed in the conference office, it's a little bit different. Our focus on the business ops, especially in a mid-major league, is a little bit different. And it's comparable to what you all face compared to your peers on campus in an autonomy conference or something like that. But like probably many industries, but this industry in particular is very much keeping up with the Joneses mentality. And so one of the things I've seen in my career at conferences is people making decisions just based on what other conferences are doing with a basketball championship, a softball championship, or whatever, social media. And so one of the things we've tried to do is, to your point, is like establish a culture of, okay, it's good to know and benchmark, like you said, Jill, of what your peers are doing, but let's take an actual look at the data to see if what they're doing is helpful to achieve their objective and whether that fits and meets our objective, and what is the information or structure that will really be important to us. But I think early in my career, I saw a lot of the keeping up with the Joneses that didn't always make sense. That might be great for conference A to do this, and on the surface, or from a public perception, or a coach's or AD's perceptions, we should be doing that. But if you just dial back or peel back the onion just a little bit, you might reveal that actually is not going to be helpful for us, and it might not even be helpful for them. So let's use our data, carve our path based on our objectives and the information that we have.
Well, kudos to you, because I think the America East is one of the conferences I look at from the outside and say you're pretty clear about who you are and what you want to be, which is student athlete centric. And that comes across loud and clear. Not that there's not room for data in that.
Oh, for sure. No, you need it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you nailed the analysis. Number one, what's the problem we're trying to solve, or what are we trying to measure? I think a real clarity, when you get into a job and the board of trustees asks for the following 10 metrics, does that even make any sense anymore? Is that how we want to measure ourselves? And what are we learning from those metrics? So as a new AD, it was for me defining what we want to measure, or what problem we're trying to help through data and technology, the ROI analysis that we talked about, and then clean data. Having clean, you could buy every fancy, we used to joke all the time about at Notre Dame about keeping up with the Joneses. Are we buying a Porsche and we don't have a driver's license?
Yeah.
Because if you do buy some of these fancy sports science, which are fantastic, is the coach going to care? Is the coach going to use the data? Because I'm telling you what your player load is, and I'm telling you so-and-so needs a break. And if they're not using it, it's worth nothing. And two, who's going to crunch it? We're lucky to have, we're not UC Davis, but we do have a great business intelligence grad program. Like, those are the folks lining up at my office and saying, how can we help to get some experience? And I'm saying, this could be exciting, right? What when the Eagles play and we play against them, how are our concession stands doing? I want to learn game times. I want to learn what weather impacts on that. And they're loving it, right? So some simple free stuff that's only as good as the data you put into it.
Yeah, I think that the people are the most important part of any transition towards a more data-driven organization that makes decisions like that. And in my experience, we've been fortunate to hire people from analytical backgrounds. And the systems are one thing, but absent the people that have the desire, capabilities, skill sets to be disciplined about decision-making, to have the quantitative skills to do the analysis, to have in some ways, the IT skills to help coordinate the systems as required, then you can buy all the fancy software you want, but the effect of that is going to be a bunch of investment that doesn't yield a return, unfortunately.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit from data, but just general technology, how has that improved your leadership roles as you've come up through the ranks and are now athletics directors? If you think back to when you were an intern or your entry level job or first job in college athletics, how has technology allowed you to maybe be more nimble and dynamic in your decision making and communication? And has there been positive changes with technology? Because not all technology is helpful or good technology.
Well, I mean, I think when you think globally about how technology has redefined the way people consume what we're putting out there, which is college athletic events, just watching that change over the years has been fascinating. For me, I think communication and what Gen Z is expecting, less data, more technology, has been really interesting. And so we had the 80s, 90s, good economy, build amenities.
Yeah.
Don't worry about deferred maintenance, but build them all.
Right, that's right.
And then now this generation, Gen Z, wants services on demand. So that's leading us to say I don't need 4 sports psychologists, but we probably need an app. I know career-wise, it's all about handshake and stuff that happens on this virtual network so I think, keeping in tune, we're in a student-athlete centric industry, if you will. How can we communicate with them better and differently? We could spend a whole lot of money on communication when really a group me or is probably the way we're going to let our student athlete mental health peer group go.
That's right.
With a free app, right? And so it's to me, a lot of the fun, exciting changes in technology are about how are we meeting our student athletes where they are.
I think it's been fascinating, my experience earlier in my career at Stanford, to be in a place where the expectation is from the constituents and supporters is that you push the envelope from a technology standpoint. And we learned a lot about how the promise of technology sometimes doesn't live up and deliver to what people conceive of it when they think about it. And let me give you an example. We were the first college football stadium in the country to have a Wi-Fi network in the stadium. We did this because increasingly, and this is around 2010, 2011, increasingly people, the mobile device was a key part of their game day experience, whether that's checking scores or texting each other. And the first year we had the Wi-Fi network in there, we realized during the first game that there was frequency conflict between the Wi-Fi network and the CoachCom headsets, right? And you can't anticipate this. You just sort of have to deal with it. So I've had a really interesting experience, sort of on the bleeding edge of trying to figure out some of these technology related things. And I think that's kind of where we are in the data management infrastructure technology business right now. There's a lot of things that have a lot of promise in theory, and how they're actually working in practice is still being resolved. Like people talk a lot about the promise of having one unified view of all the customers that are at your game. When they scan their tickets in, what lot they parked in, if they bought a hot dog at the concession stand, who they transferred their tickets to, so you can identify the people in the stadium. All of these things make business sense in theory on paper. Whether they can be executed consistently and reliably, and then what business value you can derive from them, I think people are still trying to figure that out. And it'll be interesting to see how that continues to develop as time goes on.
Kevin, would you consider yourself, and Jill asked you the same thing, as it relates to technology and all of these things, an early adopter? So the mindset of Stanford that you described is like pushing the envelope, and that expectation given Stanford and the Bay Area. Did that like flow into how your mindset in terms of how you lead and evaluate these new technologies that are not knocking on your door, they're sending you emails and calling both of you with all of their latest bells and whistles? But are you an early adopter, and if so, or if not, like, what are the questions that you use to evaluate whether you're going to give airtime to a certain company or not?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for sure early in my career, I was as early an adopter as you could possibly be. Yeah. And that's, again, goes with the culture of what the Bay Area is like. And Davis in Northern California is very much like that as well. I think I've gotten a little more experienced in terms of the rate of adoption. Fast following is not a bad strategy sometimes. being first and finding new ways to do things are very much a part of our DNA and our organization, and we will always take pride in that at Davis. But I think I've gotten a little bit more experience as to understanding what's likely to work in practice, and sort of my pre-screening process has gotten a little bit more disciplined, I guess. Whereas early in my career, it's like, we're going to try that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it wouldn't. To tell you the truth, I still think that bias is probably productive in the grand scheme of college athletics, which can sometimes be weighed down a little bit by being a little more traditional and conservative. But, hopefully I've gotten a little smarter and more refined in my eagerness to early adopt.
Yeah. How about you, Jill? Especially sliding into the chair now and making the decisions and maybe not just evaluating and making a recommendation to someone else.
Yeah, I think I don't come by the data part naturally because I'm a lawyer by trade. 15-year, the word was my thing, right?
Yeah.
Writing, arguing, advocating, I should say. And so I probably was not in that frame of mind when I transitioned from being in-house counsel to a Notre Dame athletics employee 10 years ago. Now, I think similar to Kevin, it's a measured, I've gotten very disciplined, particularly with budget constraints that didn't exist at necessarily in the same ways at Notre Dame, of saying, as I said earlier, what's the problem I'm trying to help here? This looks like shiny object, it's exciting, but what exactly is the, revenue generation? There may be a ceiling for me that doesn't, as Kevin described earlier. So for me, I actually think the place where it's going to help us the most, some versions of cost control. I think sports medicine and medical injuries, and the more data we can get and understand, whether it's prevention or being smart with where we send people, negotiating discounts, that's a world that I'm living heavily in right now. But that was a measured response to a cost growing out of control. So that's how I see, that's how I see that I'm going to proceed. If there's something that is a problem that data or technology can assist, but I simply don't have the resources, and in some cases the time and human resources to be able to purchase the shiny object and dig in. I mean, we had an entire team of people at Notre Dame implementing time management and Teamworks. I don't have that luxury. And so it's a great product, but I'll be a little more measured.
Yeah. So given the resources that both of your schools have and our schools in our league have, because I think we're all similarly situated for the most part, without getting into like particular companies or brands, but what has been the most effective? And you might have both touched on this in a certain way, but I want to make sure that it's clear to everyone, like, where are the points that you emphasize in terms of your entire operation, from business to performance, communication, communicating across campus to student athletes, parents? Where are you finding the most utility from whatever investments you're making in the data and technology space?
For me, in where I am as just beginning my second year as an athletic director, for me, data is really important for two reasons. One, it's one of the many tools in our toolbox to get the lay of the land, in addition to the listening tour and reading. And, it's a way to kind of sit down and look over 10-year trends in the A10 and those sort of things. So it's been really educational. And second, it goes back to defining, like, part of building a culture is being really clear about what our goals are. And some of those goals are intangible and some are going to be metrics driven. So for me, not to be able to have that, ready to go, but we're at the level now. And I mentioned the sort of sports medicine, where I'm still, hey, I'm heavy into A10 financial dashboard, IPP, EADA, where I'm just seeing how different schools who we either are like or want to be more like do this financially. And so that's probably where I've found the most value, is really, and academically as well. Where are we as we're starting to get academic revenue distribution? Where are we on moving that barge a little bit if needed? And we've been in good shape, but looking at admissions data, looking at, academic support for our student athletes, like how, all that's data-based, and a lot of it's data-based. So that's sort of my mode right now.
Yeah. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, Jill covered a lot of ground on many of the operational and student athlete facing areas. I'll answer the question by talking a little bit about a business operation or revenue generating answer. But I think that what we try to do is we really work well with our central development office. And universities sometimes can be criticized for not being sophisticated as far as how they're managing their data or their customer databases. But actually, if you look at big research universities like UC Davis, I think quite often they're very good at managing alumni databases or donor databases, and whether that's research ratings or managing which donor is assigned to what contact, and the CRM that we have at Davis and the processes that our development offices have built is very effective. So we try to rely on that in our fundraising operation as well, and that's been good. So I think that there are, even at our sort of level of resource, the university is generating hundreds of millions of dollars a year in fundraising. So the development budget is willing to make those types of investments in the more sophisticated tools, and to the extent that we can have that be part of our revenue generating operation is really an efficient solution for us.
So the last line of questions, I guess, I'll dig into, talked about resources and challenges and needing to invest in those things that are going to give us the best ROI, however we're defining that on a campus. As you look at staffing and hiring people, and you mentioned this, Kevin, bringing in people who are more analytical, where do you see this going? You're both hopefully going to be in this chair or other AD chairs for a long time now. How do you look at you building your teams now and 5-10 years in the future, and those folks understanding their capabilities around data management, whether they're actually crunching the numbers as a data scientist or just their capabilities to be able to understand it and process it? How do you see that trend impacting, or I guess, is it fair? Will there be a trend in hiring people that fit that mold a little bit more than maybe we've seen when we were coming up through the ranks?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I'll answer the question in this way, and if I were going through school now and wanting to work in sports, I would do everything I could to learn the fundamentals of the sports industry as a complement to a technical skill, whether that's computer science or a really rigorous quantitative statistics. And those technical skills will be tremendous differentiators for you in obtaining a really great entry-level position that has really good access, in fact, to the high-level decision makers in the organization. And in big sports organizations that are dealing with a lot of revenue, those people are very valuable. And so if I was 18 again and wanting to find my way into a sports organization in an important job, I would be very inclined to try to major in a technical, quantitatively aligned field and complement that with a fundamental understanding of sports business.
Jill?
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I told you he was smarter than I am, but no, yes, I absolutely agree with that. I'm seeing more and more people coupling their business intelligence minor with marketing and with others. So I think that's absolutely, just hired a marketing staff, and what we're talking about is not only they say, what do you have going on in data capture right now? And I say, why? And how would you use it? Because I don't want us just parroting fancy words, but it's looking for those mixed skill set. So whatever your day job is, and then to be able to have that ability to be analytic about it is really, really important. And certainly that's how my brain works. So that's probably what I tend to favor in hiring is people who are going to think that way, regardless of whether they have a data or BI minor or major or whatever it is. So I think it's huge. And that's as someone who's not going to go spend a lot of money on, but just understanding in each division as we go through master planning, what are we trying to get out of this from a revenue perspective? As we go through, hiring coaches, what's their approach to the use of analytics to help the student athlete? So I think it's really just continuing to grow in importance.
So I'll iterate on my first question to be my last question. So if we haven't quite seen a data revolution across all of Division I yet, will there be a time where we look back and say, you know what, this period of time relative to technology and data really transformed how we operate our business, how we operate on campus or in a conference office?
It's taken longer than I thought. And I think there have been a lot of good micro ideas. I think the implementation is huge. I mean, when you really think of it, I remember Jack Swarbrick at Notre Dame, 9 years ago talking about what's the CRM for student athletes where we could have every data point it's a lot. There's a lot out there. And, is it coming? Yes, it's already happening, but I think it's going to take a heck of a lot longer than I initially thought it would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly a revolution in awareness and appreciation for the importance of having the right information and deriving insights from the data that are actionable. I think certainly, if you want to use the term revolution, I think that the awareness revolution is going on. To me, it's a human capital question, and whether or not in college athletics we're going to be able to attract the type of people that can execute some of the strategies and tactics required to be successful in this quantitative work. And in some cases where the revenue is more moderate, the upside of making the investments in those type of people might not be justified. Now, having said that, and much of the Power Five, it's probably time for people to really look at making those investments. And certainly in my previous role at Stanford, we did that, and it's paid off.
Good. Well, Jill, Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today. This was a really good conversation. I hope folks learned a lot about how data technology is being used by decision makers on campus. And thanks for being here today.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
us.